Hello, this is Ross Bliley from the podcast Pigskin Tales. This podcast is sponsored by Sterling Soap Company. With products sold throughout 41 locations around the globe, Sterling Soap Company has a unique assortment of products to choose from for your loved one for the holidays. Handmade artisan soaps created by Roderick and Amanda Lovin since 2012, these products are affordable and provide great value. Act now and save on your shipping costs. If you purchase $75 or more, your shipping cost is free in the United States. Shop now online at sterlingsoap.com. Face off with Firefly Publishing for another drop into the fascinating world of pro hockey history with Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2. Following his bestseller, hockey historian and writer Eric Zwig opens the doors to the Pro Hockey Hall of Fame, revealing a treasure of untold tales, bizarre incidents, and captivating trivia that will leave the most devoted puckhead astounded. Just to name drop a few of the players he's included in this book are Wayne Gretzky, Jaromir Jagr, and Bobby Hull. Hockey Hall of Fame True Stories 2 is a must-read for pro hockey fans who crave more than just scores and statistics. Mr. Zwig invites you to uncover the true stories that have shaped the sport, ensuring that you will never look at the game of hockey the same way again. So skate on over to Amazon.com, Target, and Walmart to get your copy now.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com.
Hello, sports fans, and welcome to another edition of Yesterday's Sports on the Sports History Network. Joining me today, again, is my friend Dave DePaolo, a fellow Dallas Cowboys fan. And since we are coming up on Thanksgiving, we thought we would go through some of the Dallas Cowboys Thanksgiving games. We picked out a few that we thought were memorable. I think the main one we agreed to focus on, Dave, was the 1974 game between the Cowboys and Redskins, which will forever be known as the Clint Longley game. So,
yeah, we both had those on our list, Mark. We made the list separately, and then the next day you said you're going to do these three, and I'm going to do these three. So I kind of figured we both have that one in there somewhere, you know. And so we can do that one last, and then if you want to go with the first one you want to do, you go right ahead.
Okay, I'll just go through this one. Won't take too long. This game was played on Thanksgiving, which was November 25th, 1971. The Cowboys were going into this game with a 7-3 record. They were playing the Los Angeles Rams. Rams were going into this game with a 6-3-1 record. And the Rams were battling the 49ers for first place in the NFC Western Division. They held a half-game lead on San Francisco going into this game. And the Cowboys had a half-game lead over Washington for first place in the NFC Eastern Division. And the game started off great for the Cowboys. Backup defensive back, I believe, was he a cornerback or safety? Ike Thomas.
I thought he was a corner, maybe.
Corner, yeah, I think you're right. Backup cornerback. He returned the kickoff 89 yards for a touchdown. But the Rams came back and scored 2 touchdowns of their own. They took a 14-7 lead. Dallas tied the game when Roger Staubach connected with Bullet Bob Hayes for a 51-yard touchdown strike. I'll just quickly show this. You remember these, Dave? 1968.
Those were, yeah. Is that little bigger poster, little mini poster they call it?
5x7.
Yeah, those were them.
They were inserted into packs of football cards.
Yes, I had them hanging up in my bedroom.
Right.
I'm up near the sin. I think my brother, who was not into sports, after about a year, he took them down. They were taped up. I don't think my father appreciated that too much, but I remember those things. Some of them, for some reason, were very shiny.
Yes. Yeah.
And some of them weren't as shiny as others, but I remember getting Virgil Carter from the Bengals.
Right.
And there was all kinds of different guys.
That's right.
Gail Sears was in there, I think.
Yep.
I might even have some of those around us still.
Yeah.
That's great stuff, Mark.
Yep. Well, back to the game. In the third quarter, so now it's tied 14-14. The third quarter, Lance Allworth, who they picked up from the San Diego Chargers, caught a 21-yard pass from Staubach to give Dallas a 21-14 lead. But the Rams weren't done, and they tied it at 21 to end the third quarter. And then Dwayne Thomas scored the final touchdown on a 5-yard run to give the Cowboys a 28-21 victory. That's probably the first Thanksgiving game I remember watching. Let's see. The Cowboys' offense was not overpowering in this game, but they played well enough and didn't turn the ball over. And the Doomsday defense forced 3 turnovers, and they held the Rams' running game to only 86 yards. So that's really the first game I remember well as far as Thanksgiving games go.
Yeah, that's why you picked that probably. I remember Ike Thomas vividly.
Yep.
I remember that opening kickoff because I think there was another game where he ran a kickoff back. It was either the week after or the week before.
That is exactly right.
And I remember the Cowboys, that was their Super Bowl year that they won.
Yep.
And they were actually 4-3 at one point.
That's right.
So they had won 3 games prior to that Thanksgiving game, and they were kind of on a roll. In fact, they never lost another game that year, but I don't think.
No.
But I don't remember all those scores that you said. I don't remember Lance Allworth scoring.
Yeah.
And I don't even really remember Bob Hayes, but I remember the opening kickoff, and there was a couple other plays in that game I remember, but I for some reason I didn't realize it was tied 21-21. That was in the third quarter, I think.
Yeah, it was a close game. It was an important game for both teams, and it was no blowout. It was not a blowout.
They had those nice blue and white uniforms, the Rams. Those were beautiful.
Yeah, the old classics. And you're right, that Ike Thomas. You're right. It was the following week against the Jets. He did the same exact thing. Opening kickoff. He ran it all the way for a touchdown.
Yeah.
Okay, Dave, you got a game there you want to talk about?
I do. It's not so far back. I guess, Mark, we might not score old school, but I guess the amount of time that's going on up till now, it is 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And the reason why I picked these 3 games is when I think of Thanksgiving and just remember watching games. I've watched them all on Thanksgiving since I think 69. But I remember these 3 for some reason. This one being the most recent, Miami against the Cowboys, also known as you would say as the Leon Lett game.
That's
right. And it hailed that day down there. It was like 33 degrees. It was above freezing, but there was hail.
Yep.
And the Cowboys, I think in 93, of those so-called dynasty teams that they had in the 90s, I think the 93 team was their best team, even though their record wasn't as good as 92.
Right.
They already had 4 losses on Thanksgiving. They were 7-4. And Miami had a better record. Miami, I believe, only had 2 losses going into this game. And a lot of people were picking those 2 teams to play in the Super Bowl, believe it or not.
Right.
I kind of forgot that, Mark.
Yep.
But when I started looking into it and started doing some research on it, I realized that, this was, Miami was better than I thought. But both of their starting quarterback and their second string quarterback were out. Okay. Dan Marino was hurt for the year. He had that Achilles.
Right.
And the backup, Mitchell, he was out. So Scott Mitchell was out. And so they went with Steve DeBerg. And I don't know how old he was at that point, but he was pretty old.
Yeah.
He played a long time. I think he played until his 40s at DeBerg.
Yeah.
But anyways, it was a crazy weather game. And the Miami had some guys that came. They had a lot of guys that came from other teams. They had at running back. They had Keith Byers, who had played for the Eagles.
Yeah.
They had Troy Vincent in the defensive side of the ball. He was covering Alvin Harper that day. I remember that vividly because they were talking about who was going to cover Irvin, who was going to cover Harper. And I'll get to it was kind of non-descriptive. It was really Kevin Williams, the receiver for the Cowboys, actually scored 2 touchdowns, one on a catch and one on a punt return, where I think he slid into the end zone with the ball. He was holding the ball up, and he slid into the end zone like on his knee, like one knee on the ground. And the game was 14-13 in the fourth quarter. With 2:16 left, the Cowboys were up by a point.
Yep.
And Eddie Murray missed a 32-yard field goal, which would have been nice. That would have given him a little cushion. That would have been a 4-point lead. But he misses that.
Chip shot.
And the other thing I want to say about that game is I remember Darren Woodson had 10 solo. Darren Woodson had a big game.
Yeah.
He had like 10 solo tackles, if you could believe that. Like he was all over the field.
Wow. And
they had some pretty good weapons, Miami. They had Irving Fryer, a receiver. They had O.J. McDuffie. They had Mark Ingram.
Mm-hmm.
And then the tight end was Keith Jackson, who actually played with Troy Aikman in college in Oklahoma before Aikman got hurt.
Right.
What ended up happening was the Miami put together at the end a 12-play drive, believe it or not. They got the ball back with not a lot of time. I think it was about 2 minutes left. And the ironic part of this whole thing, we call it the Leon Lett game. With about 1:03 left to play, Leon Lett steps in front of a screen pass, and he could have picked it off. The game would have been over right then and there. Yeah. But he dropped. It was right to him. Looked like he was throwing the ball right to him, but DeBerg played very well. He was 8 for 11 in that drive. Uh-huh. And they drive down to the 40-yard line, and that was good for the Cowboys because the weather conditions were terrible. Yeah. And they were trying to clear a spot on the field. Stoyanovich, who was a good kicker, by the way, from Miami, he gets it blocked. Right. He's going to go for the game-winning field goal. Jimmy Jones, the defensive lineman for the Cowboys, number 97. Yeah. He blocks it, and the ball's rolling around on the ground. It's spinning around down around the 10-yard line or somewhere down there. Yeah. And then all of a sudden, you see Leon Lett come down. He mustn't have been aware of the rule. He couldn't have possibly known. Just get away from it. Yeah. Slides into the ball. He kicks it, and the Miami ends up recovering. It looks like they kind of recovered in the end zone, but they replaced the ball back around I forgot. It ended up being like a 19-yard field goal when he kicked it. Right. So the ball was somewhere around the 10-yard line. And he drills it through, and that pretty much was the game right there. But, they had the game wrapped up. And I think the Cowboys had lost the week before to Atlanta, so that sent them on a losing streak of 2 games or, I don't think it was 3 games. It could have been, though. It's possible. But after the game, Leon Lett was visibly upset. They said he was in the locker room. He was in tears. And Jimmy went over to him, Jimmy Johnson, the coach. He says, you never have to worry about being traded as long as I'm here, he says to him. And, he got suspended a few times, Leon Lett, in his career for, I think, violating. But let me tell you, he was a very good player.
Yeah, he was.
He wasn't a Hall of Famer, but he was better than average. He was very, very good. And if you watch his play, if you go back and watch films of him playing, he was actually manhandling guys, Mark.
There were times where he was dominating.
Yes.
Dominating.
Yes. He was a big guy. He was about 6'6", I think. And he was probably close to 300 pounds. He was at least 280.
Oh, yeah.
And he was a big framed guy, and he was very tough, and he could make plays. He made a lot of plays for them.
I think maybe if it wasn't for his drug problems and not always having his head in the game, maybe he could have been a Hall of Famer. He had the talent.
Yeah, I mean, he ended up coaching with the Cowboys. I'm not sure. He was there kind of fairly recently, and he was actually coaching youth football too. He was coaching young kids. I think there's a video, Mark, of him on YouTube with the young kids. I'm not sure what it's entitled, but it is out there somewhere. But he was a very quiet guy. I remember the first Super Bowl that they went to in '92. He was sweating bullets on media day. Right. They actually he didn't really want to talk. He didn't even really want to go to it, but I guess you're obligated to go. And he was taking his hat off, and he was dripping with sweat.
Yeah.
He just he wasn't big on that kind. And of course, what made it worse was in the Super Bowl the year before, he was running down the field with that interception, or he picked up a fumble. I'm sorry. And he was running down, and he held the ball low. He said he was trying to be like Michael Irvin, he said, okay? And he put the ball down low next to his side. Yeah. And the guy for the Bills, I think it was Don Beebe, maybe, he swatted the ball out of his hands. And so that was, the game was already in hand, obviously. Yeah. But so when he slid into the ball on Thanksgiving, you could hear Bob Trumpy. He was doing the game with Dick Enberg. And he goes, oh, my, and Trumpy goes, Leon, Lanny goes, oh, no, Leon. So that was two huge gaps in a row.
That's right.
Back-to-back years. But he kind of ironed things out. And then by the late 90s, he was, he was a very, very good player. He really was.
Yes, he was. He definitely was. Okay, I'll go to my second game. November 23rd, 1978. Dallas played Washington. Both teams had an 8-4 record going into this game, and the Redskins had a new head coach, Jack Pardee, who had played for Washington 2 seasons. Most of his career he played with the Rams, right? He played 1971 and 1972. He played with the Redskins. So without George Allen there, it seemed like the intense rivalry that they had was kind of dying down a little bit. But here's the guy, Dave, that kept it going.
Oh, there he is.
Joe Theismann.
Yep.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
He kept that rivalry going. So,
yeah.
He's the guy that kept the rivalry going. So it was October, going back to October 2nd, Washington led Dallas 9-3 on Monday Night Football. That was at RFK Stadium. And the Redskins had a 4th down. There was only a few seconds left in the game. They didn't want to risk a turnover, so they took a safety. And Theismann took the snap and he ran to the end zone. Instead of just taking a knee in the end zone, he held the ball up like taunting the Cowboys.
I remember that now. Yep. Yes.
He was taunting them, holding the ball up. And here's another one. Here's a guy that did not like that at all. He tackled him very hard.
Charlie Waters. I forgot about that.
That's right. Charlie Waters.
He did. He did tackle him.
He almost forced a fumble. When Theismann was holding the ball up and Waters ran into the end zone and tackled him very hard. He actually did fumble the ball, but it was out of bounds already. So the Cowboys did not take kindly to that taunting. And then I forgot, after he fumbled, but it was out of bounds, and then he picked up the ball and spiked it. And you could see the Cowboys were not happy with that at all. Even Larry Cole, who was usually very mellow,
Pretty laid back,
he ran up to Theismann and said something like, we're not going to forget that. So 7 weeks later. So now,
Mark, was that the first year he started?
It may have been, because George Allen didn't like him too much, I don't think, for some reason. He stuck with Kilmer. George Allen always stuck with Kilmer.
So Kilmer was still there in 1977? Do you remember that or no?
I think he was, but he was now the backup to Theismann. Because he had to be probably 40 years old by then. So now we get to the Thanksgiving game, and this game was never close. In the second quarter, Drew Pearson caught a 53-yard touchdown pass from Staubach, and Dallas led 20-0 at halftime.
Wow.
Then things only got worse for Washington in the second half. In the fourth quarter, backup fullback Larry Brinson ran for a 39-yard touchdown to give Dallas a 37-3 lead. And then late in the fourth quarter, former Cowboy tight end Gene Fugit scored a 16-yard pass reception to make the score slightly more respectable. The final was Dallas 37, Washington 10. And Dallas really dominated in that game. They outgained Washington in total yardage, 507 to 201. And the Cowboys gained 289 yards rushing, led by backup fullback Scott Laidlaw. Laidlaw gained 122 yards on 16 carries and scored 2 touchdowns. And Drew Pearson gained 116 yards receiving, and Tony Hill added another 94 yards.
Wow. Do you remember vividly, Mark, watching that game?
I remember vividly watching that game, yes. The only bad thing about that game, I think it was in the fourth quarter. We were at my aunt and uncle's, where they always have a big family gathering for Thanksgiving.
Right.
In the fourth quarter, me and my brother were really enjoying it, because you know how that rivalry was. We really hated the Redskins, so we were really enjoying that game. But then in the fourth quarter, we got a phone call that my grandfather died. So that
oh, jeez.
Yeah. Well, he had cancer, so it wasn't, like a great shock, but it kind of ruined the joy of our Thanksgiving.
Yeah, no, I could certainly see that putting a damper on things. Yeah. Wow.
And defensively, Dallas held John Riggins to only 40 yards rushing. They sacked Joe Theismann 3 times, and he had only 10 completions for 150 yards.
Well, yeah, he had a tough... I was looking at that list of quarterbacks, Mark, for the Redskins, and I guess, for between 76 and 78, which is the game you're talking about, 78.
Right.
They alternated, and I was looking that up as we were just talking, and Kilmer, it went from 76, Kilmer 9 games to 5 for Theismann. And then Kilmer 8 to 6 in 77 for Kilmer 8, Theismann 6.
Right.
And then Theismann 14, and Kilmer started 2 games in 78.
Right.
And that was I guess that was his last year. But, I was curious about that when you started talking about it, because Theismann was around for a while, longer than you think.
Oh, yeah.
He came from the Canadian League, and probably he was kind of a hot dogger. I don't think George Allen was into anything like you said. He was into the older guys and stuff, but I don't think that Allen was too fond of stuff. He was very. Remember, he changed his name.
Yeah. Yeah. Theismann. To rhyme with Heisman.
Yes, exactly. It was Theismann, remember?
Theismann. And he changed it to rhyme with Heisman.
Exactly. He's still around. I see him on TV. I don't know if he's doing broadcasting, but I see him around with his he's had some work done to him, I can tell you that.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. He was always kind of that kind of, but remember the game was it a Monday night or was it a Sunday game where he got his teeth knocked out?
Oh yeah, I forget.
And he was showing. He was showing the. Somebody was interviewing him after the game. I don't know. I think it might have been against the Cowboys. I can't remember. But he smiles and his teeth were half. They got knocked right out.
Wow.
Yeah. You got to give him credit. He was a pretty tough. He hung in there. He took a lot of big hits.
Yeah, he was good. He was a good quarterback, and he wasn't really a big guy.
No, but he was very athletic.
Yes,
very athletic.
So just to wrap that up, the Cowboys went on to win their 5th NFC title, before losing a close game to the Steelers in the Super Bowl. That was Super Bowl 13. And the Redskins never recovered from this loss. They lost their next 3 games, and they finished the season 8-8.
Really?
Yeah. And they started that season 5-0.
Yeah, I don't remember that as far as the Redskins go.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, they never recovered from that loss. That was they took a real shellacking in that game.
No, it's funny how you could start a season like that, and just it becomes by the end of the year, it's a completely different season.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah. So what else? What other game do you have there, Dave?
My second game, Mark, is the following year, 1979. The Cowboys were going to play the Oilers.
That's right.
And once again, it was a big. Game for both teams. And of course, it was the Cowboys and Oilers. They're both from Texas.
Yeah.
So that's a big game to begin with. But the biggest thing that happened, though, that week, obviously, was they got rid of Hollywood Henderson, the Cowboys, during the middle of the season. Well, not the middle, but that week leading up to Thanksgiving. They'd put him off the team, got rid of him.
That's right.
And the week before, he was doing some stuff on the sidelines at a Redskin game.
Yeah.
And the Cowboys were getting beat pretty good.
Yeah.
Pretty good. And the television cameras captured it.
Right.
And Landry did not like it. He did not like it.
No.
And he was holding up a towel that Preston Pearson was I guess came up with these towels.
That's right.
And he didn't like it. Anyways, he was off the team. And I'm going to be honest with you. I don't think we really knew back then what was going on with Hollywood Henderson. We didn't know he was on dope.
No.
And he was a very, very, very good player. This guy would be a Hall of Fame material if he had a normal career, regular 12, 10-year career. He was that good.
Unbelievable talent.
And I was very upset. I remember this vividly. That's why I picked this game. And, you know, they ended up putting, I think D.D. Lewis was starting in his place, or I can't remember if he was already starting, but
Mike Hegman. Mike Hegman.
Yeah, well, okay, they put Hegman in then, yep. But anyway, the game started out pretty good. And once I started watching, it was redone, in fact. You could watch that whole game. It was really, really good. But Staubach was the number 1 rated quarterback that year. This was his last year.
Yes.
This was his last season, 1979.
That's right.
And some people thought, in fact, I think Dick Enberg mentions it in the telecast, a lot of people thought this was Staubach's best year.
Yeah.
People were talking about like it was his best year of his career.
It might have been.
So, yeah. So the Cowboys were 8-4. Houston was 9-3. Once again, it was Dick Enberg, but it wasn't Merlin Olsen this time with him, not Bob Trumpy.
Right.
And he opens up the game, Staubach, with a 56-yard touchdown to Drew Pearson. And the Oilers respond. A 61-yard run by Earl Campbell, who absolutely murdered the Cowboys that day.
Yeah.
There, now you're talking, Mark. There you go.
Yeah.
Earl Campbell, that's right.
Earl Campbell.
Yeah. I met him at the Hall of Fame. Actually, he came into the bathroom, not to give too much information, but we were in there taking a leak, and Earl Campbell stands next to me at the toilet, and we started talking about the skull commercial that he did on television at the time.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? He got a big kick out of that.
Yeah.
But the Cowboys then, in that game, I'm going to tell you, I remember this even before I rewatched it. Staubach was exceptionally sharp.
Yeah.
And Dorsett looked exceptionally fast that day. I don't know if he had some kind of thing going on with Earl Campbell, some kind of little rivalry there between the two of them. But boy, oh boy, you go back and watch that game. Dorsett looked sharp, but he looked fast.
Yeah.
He really did. Yes, he did. And it's one of the very few games, might even be the only game, that Randy White was out. One of my favorite players. He didn't play. He was hurt.
I didn't remember that.
Neither did I until I watched the game.
And you know what else?
I did not remember it.
Know what else, Dave?
What happened, Mark?
Which would explain why they had such a tough time stopping Earl Campbell. So Randy White was out, which I don't even remember that. Isn't that also the year Ed Jones went into boxing?
Yes.
Ed Jones was.
It was the year.
Charlie Waters was out for the season with an injury.
Yes, he was.
And Thomas Henderson was gone.
Yes, John Dutton.
That's right.
John Dutton was there.
Yeah.
And Harvey Martin obviously was still there.
Yeah.
But they had a hard time stopping Earl Campbell. I'll tell you, he was brutal.
Yeah.
But and the Staubach, Dorsett lost a fumble in that game, and Staubach was picked off, I think, twice. And the Oilers had some very good players.
Oh yeah,
the Oilers had Campbell. They had Rob Carpenter in the bet. There you go. Now you're talking.
Yeah, there's another one.
He was a Hall of Famer.
That's right.
He's a Hall of Famer, Robert Brazil.
Yeah.
And I think they had Curly Culp at the time, Mark.
Yeah.
They had Curly Culp was on that team.
Played the 3-man line, right?
Yeah. They had Kenny Burrow, 00. He was there.
Yeah. The
receiver. And they had another very solid linebacker, Ken Washington. He played with the Oilers that year. He was very good. But the Cowboys at one time, and I forgot about this really when I watched the game, I was surprised because I was so disappointed that they had lost this game, but they were up 21-10 at one point, 21-10.
Wow.
And they also, the two other receivers they had besides Kenny Burrow, they had Mike Renfro, who later went to the Cowboys,
yep.
and Richard Castor, the former Jet.
Oh, yeah.
How about that?
Yeah.
You know? But they couldn't stop Earl Campbell, and at the halftime, it was 21-17, Mark. Could not stop him. He had another long run of 28 yards, Earl Campbell. In the third quarter, Mike Renfro scored on a double fake play. They faked the pass to the running back, and then he turned around. Pastorini was the quarterback.
Yeah.
And he faked like a wide receiver screen, and then he threw the ball downfield to Renfro. And it was like a 47-yard pass, 50 yards almost. And Houston was up 23-21.
Right.
And I remember as I watched the game, you could see the Cowboys kind of like, I don't want to say fading, but they were. As the game got on, the Oilers got better and the Cowboys got a little worse, not as good as that game continued on.
Yeah.
So in the fourth quarter, Septien hit a field goal, and the Cowboys were up 24-23. Okay, but Staubach threw another terrible, terrible interception. Pastorini, a little later on, he made a great throw to Mike Barber, the tight end, who was also very good.
Yep.
They had a lot of good players, the Oilers, that year, lots. And then he threw a beautiful touchdown pass. Kenny Burrow outstretched in the end zone to make it 30-24. That's how the game ended, 30-24.
Yeah.
Very, very disappointing. That was a 32-yard grab by Kenny Burrow. Beautiful. You should have seen it. I forgot about it. You can't remember everything.
Yeah.
But when I rewatched it, I said to myself, boy, what a hell of a grab that was.
Yeah.
And it was very disappointing. I tell you, at one point in that game, Staubach was so sharp, he only had 2 incompletions. He was 22 out of 24 at one point.
Wow.
Okay? He was 22 out of 24, Mark.
Wow.
He had, let me just see. He didn't have a ton of yards.
Yeah.
But he had some, let's see, he ended up 21 out of 30 for 287.
Wow.
287 was pretty good in 1979. I want to tell people that. They might say today, oh, that's nothing. That's chicken feed. But you know something? Back then, a 300-yard game was a big deal.
Sure was.
They didn't have all these crazy rules where you could just about do anything you want on offense, like what they do today.
Nope.
But Earl Campbell, he was the guy that really did him in, Mark. He had Campbell, unbelievable, 34 rushes for 196 yards, 2 touchdowns.
That was hard.
He was brutal, okay?
That was hard to do against Dallas.
They could not stop him, Mark. They could not stop him. They made stupid penalties. They made a big penalty where they had 12 men on the field.
Yeah.
And that Houston was getting ready to punt. It was a punt.
Yeah.
And they gave the ball. It gave them a first down.
Yeah.
And then they scored right after that penalty. First play, boom, it was a touchdown. So they made a crazy couple of penalties, but they really missed. I don't care what anybody says. They really missed all those defensive players that you talked about.
Oh yeah.
And they really missed Hollywood Henderson.
It's four of your top players: Henderson, Charlie Waters, Randy White, and who was the other one? I forget.
Randy White never missed. Speaking of Randy White, Mark, here's a little something. Okay. These were made by Pepsi. It says it on the front there.
Yeah.
Pepsi right here.
That's neat.
And he was I got one of him and I got one of the bottom, whoever makes it's on there.
Yeah.
It says world champion players 2 of number 6, Randy White, 1977. These came out.
Right.
And I got one of our favorite, Bob Lilly. But listen, I remember that game. I remember sitting. I was in college.
Uh-huh.
That was my last year in college. And I remember I started doing homework after the game was over and just being very, very, very disappointed, Mark. Very, very disappointed, yeah, because
that was
I used to work on Thanksgiving Day at the ice cream shop.
right.
And we didn't own it yet in 1979, but after we bought it in 82, I would work till about 3 o'clock, and it was always very busy. People would come in for orders that we had pre-made orders, and then I would get home and I would watch the Cowboys at 4 o'clock, 4:15, whenever they went on. But it was like a ritual for all those years, up until the time we sold the store or closed the store in 2019.
Right.
So you're talking from 1976 to 2019.
Wow, that's
all those years. I would do the same thing. I would go up, even when I was just working there, and then I would go home, watch the Cowboys. So when they lost, they had a pretty good record, though. I forgot what that record was. I don't know if you remember that record on Thanksgiving, but at one time it was very impressive.
That's right. And they lost. That was their third loss in a row, that game.
That's the first time since 1974 that they had lost 3 games in a row. You're right, correct.
Yeah.
That's right.
Okay. So now
go. You take this last one because we both agreed on this one. So go ahead.
That will conclude part 1 of our Thanksgiving special. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you, and God bless.
This podcast is part of the Sports History Network, your headquarters for the yesteryear of your favorite sport. You can learn more at sportshistorynetwork.com. Hey there, sports history fan. This is Arnie Chapman, a.k.a. the Football History Dude, and I hope that you enjoyed this recent episode presented by the Sports History Network and were able to learn some good old-fashioned sports history knowledge nuggets. I started the Sports History Network back in 2020 with the mission to help podcasters find a community of like-minded sports history nerds, as well as helping aspiring podcasters to start their own shows. We have a little bit over 30 shows on the network right now covering all sorts of sports history, but as far as I'm concerned, we're just at the toothpick in the ocean moment, that can't even figure it out because there's so much more coming. We wanted to create the ultimate headquarters for sports yesteryear, starting with Podcast Network and our website, but we're going to continue to move into other mediums as well. And here's the cool part, because we want you to be part of our team. So if you're interested in starting your own podcast, or maybe being a guest on one of our shows, or who knows, maybe even writing an article for us over on the website. Seriously, all you gotta do is reach out to us on the contact page over at sportshistorynetwork.com. You can be as technologically savvy as a Neanderthal tapping on a stone trying to figure out this whole hieroglyphics thing back in the day. Again, it doesn't matter, because even if you don't understand the whole podcast space, we have a production team that can pretty much help you out with doing everything. All you gotta do, head over to sportshistorynetwork.com, head to the contact page, fill it out. That message goes right to me, and I'll reach out to you as soon as I can. But for now, dude, I'm through if you're through.